Good morning. My name is Fareed Khan. I am the founder of the advocacy group Canadians United Against Hate and a human rights activist. And I'm here today with my colleagues to call attention to the latest atrocity that Israel has committed against Palestinians as it continues its genocide in Gaza, and to call out Mark Carney's government for being complicit in Israel's crimes. I begin by acknowledging that we gather here today on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people here in the National Capital Region, and the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and Mississaugas of the Credit in the Toronto area. Joining me remotely today are Maysa Hawwash of Doctors Against Genocide, Dr. Ben Thomson with Eyewitness Gaza, Dr. Aliya Khan, co-chair of Doctors for Humanity, Rabbi David Mivasair of Independent Jewish Voices, and Hugh Doherty, co-chair of Canadians in Support of Refugees in Dire Need. I understand we're having a couple of technical glitches and that Rabbi David and Hugh will not be able to be visible on camera, but their audio will be coming through when they speak. We stand before you today as a coalition of medical professionals and human rights activists to highlight Israel's most recent act of evil in Gaza. We call on the Canadian government to find its moral compass and take urgent action to halt more than 30 months of genocide that continues in Gaza as I speak. This horror has been inflicted on Palestinians in Gaza for more than 900 days by Israel, with the complicity of Western nations, including Canada. Even as attention in the region shifts elsewhere, we can't look away. One recent horror demands that we speak today. Multiple confirmed media reports since last week describe how Israeli soldiers tortured an 18-month-old baby, Jawad Abu Nasser, for 10 hours in front of his helpless father. They burned him with cigarettes, drove a nail into his leg, and inflicted multiple puncture wounds to his body. This is the banality of evil, as described by Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt, where ordinary people commit depraved actions without remorse. We speak of this one child because his suffering symbolizes the evil of Israel and their genocidal mindset that has set the Middle East ablaze. This is the most documented genocide in history, broadcast in real time for 905 days on our screens and our phones. Yet Canada continues to ship arms to Israel, making our government complicit, as if we handed weapons to a known mass murderer and looked away as he continued his slaughter. The death toll in Gaza is staggering. Euromed Human Rights Monitor reports nearly 77,000 Palestinians killed in Gaza by the end of February, more than a third of them children. Two independent studies, one by Ben Gurion University professor Yaakov Garb and another by Australian academics Richard Hill and Gideon Polya, estimate the true death toll in Gaza is already between 377,000 and possibly as high as 700,000. And these two reports were released last summer, so the number is definitely higher. And yet still Canada does nothing in any substantive way to stop the horror. For 2.5 years, Prime Minister Mark Carney and his predecessor Justin Trudeau have refused to acknowledge what Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, the UN, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, and even Israeli groups like B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel have all declared. Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. To every other Canadian official who has remained silent while keeping the weapons flowing, you have no excuse. You were asked to stop the slaughter of Palestinians. Instead, you chose to support the genocide through inaction. You chose to continue sending weapons used to kill women and children and destroy a society that's been around for millennia. Palestinians will have justice, and Canadian leaders will ultimately pay a price for supporting and enabling what the Nuremberg Tribunal called the crime of crimes. The day of reckoning is coming, and Canada's political leaders still have a chance to either stand on the right side of history or do as their predecessors did during the Mackenzie King era in the 1930s, when they abandoned their humanity. Action needs to be taken. It's far past the time to do what needs to be done, to do what's right. And we're asking on Mr. Carney and the Canadian government to live up to Canada's claims of being a human rights defender and a supporter of the international rule of law. Because if action isn't taken, then those are just words, and what they're doing is just hypocrisy. Thank you. I would now like to call on Maysa Hawwash of Doctors Against Genocide to speak.
Thank you so much, Fareed. Good morning. My name is Maysa Hawwash. Days ago, the 18-month-old Jawad Abu Nassar was detained with his father, and while the visible signs on his legs are easy to diagnose and see, I'm here to tell you something fundamental Palestinians know from living it on a daily basis. When you subject a person to torture, they cannot go back to living a normal life. That is, if the conditions for the normal life exist. In Palestine, they do not exist. Not in Gaza, not in the West Bank, and not in East Jerusalem. For decades, Palestinians have lived under apartheid, a legalized ethno-religious domination. Palestinians are subjected to violence at checkpoints, settler pogroms backed by state power, where olive trees are burned, villages raided, elders and children and families attacked and killed. Over 50,000 homes have been demolished since 1967. Our land, water, resources are stolen as standard practice. Palestinians are confined to shrinking enclaves while settlements continue to expand. No right to move, build, plant, or breathe without permits. And then you add torture to that. The UN Special Rapporteur, Francesca Albanese, documents what she calls custodial and non-custodial torture, two blades of the same genocidal machinery. Right now, over 18,500 Palestinians are detained illegally in Israeli torture camps, including 1,500 children. Nearly 100 died in custody, or I should say killed. Our colleagues treated prisoners tortured with rape, electrocution, dogs, starvation, and broken bones, and this is systemic. Children leave prison with lifelong scars, wounds unhealed, trauma haunting sleep and relationships and every aspect of their life. Torture follows them for decades. But non-custodial torture surrounds every Palestinian child, every Palestinian mother, every Palestinian father. Bombardment, displacement, destroyed homes, and manufactured starvation stunting an entire generation. Albanese states Israel has engineered a torturous environment across all occupied territory. So when torture is systemic and starvation is manufactured and cruelty is codified, that is the machinery of large-scale genocide. In Gaza, over 100,000 children and 37,000 pregnant and breastfeeding women are projected to suffer acute malnutrition through April 2026, through this month. This is engineered starvation through a brutal siege. Starving a child in early years damages their brain development permanently. Palestinian children will grow with learning disabilities, emotional regulation issues for life. Biological scars persist for decades, passing from generation to generation. Disease like diabetes, heart disease, and shortened lifespans are inherited. This torturous environment has also destroyed life itself. Life expectancy in Gaza has fallen by over 30 years, from 70 years before the genocide to approximately 40 years today. A 44% decline in 2023, 47% decline in 2024, equivalent to losing 34 to 36 years of life per person. This is the fastest decline in life expectancy in modern human history, and it is documented. A Palestinian child born today in Gaza can expect to live half as long as they would have 3 years ago. The violence has erased decades of human potential. what researchers today call as the empirical annihilation of decades of human potential. Our colleagues watch a generation's potential destroyed, knowing there is no after for recovery. Environmental poisoning is another dimension of this torturous environment. White phosphorus releases toxins, damaging our very genetic code. DNA damage passed from generation to generation. Children, they inherit this war legacy in their very biology. And then as Palestinian children, we know that they experience what we call continuous traumatic stress. There is no post stage in this trauma because the trauma never ends. Constant stress records into bodies and passes to next generations. No recovery when the torturous environment never ends. Apartheid, checkpoints, settler violence, demolition, dispossession continues unabated and supported by our own government. Yesterday, the Knesset authorized the execution by hanging for Palestinians, a default punishment, codifying what was already true, that Palestinians' life is disposable. This on top of a system where 3,400 Palestinians are held without charge or legal counsel, indefinitely without evidence or court. The UN has named it. It is a genocide. It's intentional, industrial, irreversible. So will Canada and the world continue doing nothing? Not only that, sending weapons to continue this genocide, or will Canada finally hold Israel accountable? The prescription is simple. Dismantle apartheid, dismantle the occupation, call for a sustained ceasefire, an arms embargo with no loophole, unimpeded access to Palestinians through humanitarian aid, and occupation and accountability for genocide against our future. Every day delayed, another child's future is stalling, and our humanity, our collective humanity, is degraded. There is no normal life to return to in Palestine. Our struggle is to end this genocide and to end this occupation, and to demand that the world finally stands with humanity. Thank you so much.
I'd like to call on Dr. Ben Thomson of Eyewitness Gaza to speak.
Thank you. Mohammed was in his final year of medical school, working at Al-Shifa Hospital in Gaza City, when the Israeli military came into the hospital, instructed everyone to leave, including sick, immobile, or unstable patients. Mohammed promised his patients he would care for them until they had all managed to leave. But before he had the chance, he was kidnapped and put into prison by the Israeli military. His final exams for medical school were only weeks away, so he begged the guards to release him so he could finish his medical studies. "I want to be a surgeon," he said. In response, the Israeli guards shot both of his hands, both of his thumbs obliterated by bullets. He sent me the photo, and I cried, because he was one of my exceptional students when I taught at the Islamic University of Gaza in 2023. And so I was not surprised when I learned about Israelis torturing toddler Jawad Abu Nasser. I've worked as a doctor in Gaza many times in Gaza, including during the genocide. I can tell you from firsthand experience what a 5-year-old child looks like when Israel shoots him in the head. Twice. I can tell you from firsthand experience what a 14-year-old girl looks like when Israel drops white phosphorus on the densely populated tent city she was forced to move into after her house was bombed, killing everyone in her family except her younger brother, who she now cares for. The holes that white phosphorus burned through her arms make it very challenging for her to carry her 4-year-old brother. Dozens of Canadian healthcare workers have been to Gaza during the genocide and provided their firsthand testimony to the International Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice. Many of us have returned to serve the Palestinian people who are being maimed, killed, raped, and tortured by the Israeli forces. Almost 10,000 Palestinians are still in Israeli prisons, half of whom are there without any charges. Hundreds are children. On March 30th, the Knesset, the Israeli equivalent to Parliament, approved a bill that allows capital punishment by hanging of these detainees. meaning the prisons that were torture prisons will now be death camps. So where are you, Mark Carney and Anita Anand? We've had enough of your milquetoast bland assertions of caring about human rights without any meaningful action. Your inaction perpetuates Israel's raping, killing, and genociding. Mark Carney, Anita Anand, when you started in politics, what red line did you consider forbidden to cross, the point at which you would stand up to your allies and say, enough is enough? Clearly, genocide is not that red line for you. How about Israeli systemic murdering and torturing of children? You need to stop. Stop arms exports to Israel now. Did Canadian bullets shoot off Mohammed's thumbs? I should not even be able to consider asking that question as a possibility. You have to stop all arms trade to Israel. Stop all trade with Israel. Suspend all diplomatic relations until they respect the human rights of Palestinians, Lebanese, and Iranians. As they expand their genocide from within to outside Gaza, your silence becomes more even deafening. Your inaction all that more unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for that very disturbing description of your time in Gaza. I'd now like to call upon Dr. Aliya Khan, co-chair of Doctors for Humanity, to speak.
Thank you so much, Fareed. I'm just going to share some slides. And as my colleagues have described, the torture wounds consisted of cigarette burns on this toddler's leg, and he was also inflicted puncture wounds with sharp objects while the father was forced to watch. And then after 10 hours, he was handed over to the International Committee of the Red Cross, and his father remains in Israeli detention. And the video footage and the medical report show clear burn marks and punctures on the child's body with deliberate torture. Such heinous crimes and torture cannot be tolerated in a civilized world. And we are very worried now that the death penalty has been passed, that these forms of torture of children will increase in order to extract false confessions and then proceed with the death penalty. And as my colleagues have described, at least 20,000 Palestinian children have been killed in Gaza by Israeli forces, with thousands more missing under the rubble. And over 1,000 babies under the age of 1 have been killed. And it's not just in Gaza, but it's also in the West Bank. And recently we have seen 2 young children, boys, age 5 and 7. The 7-year-old boy, Uthman, was actually blind, and they were shot in the head while they were driving home at night in occupied West Bank. So we, a coalition of medical and healthcare workers and human rights activists, are calling for urgent, concrete action by the government of Canada in response to these atrocities and the ongoing genocide. And number one, we condemn Israel for its use of torture, and we ask our government to condemn Israel for its use of torture and other violations of international humanitarian law. We ask the Canadian government to demand an independent international inquiry into the torture of all Palestinians, especially children. We are asking that there be immediate suspension of arms exports and military-related transfers to Israel. We are asking to hold the perpetrators and Israeli officials accountable for these egregious violations of international law. And we ask that we aggressively advocate for the protection of children, especially children and all civilians, under the 4th Geneva Convention. Thank you.
Thank you, Aliya. I'd now like to call on Rabbi David Mivasair of Independent Jewish Voices. I understand his video is not working, but his audio is good. So, David, if you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Fareed. So I am Rabbi David Mivasair. I'm an active member of Independent Jewish Voices Canada. And I'm speaking with you the day before the beginning of the biblical holiday of Passover that celebrates the exodus of the Hebrew slaves in Egypt. And as we read in the Torah, we're enjoined, we're commanded over and over again not to oppress others because we know the heart of the others, of being othered, because we experienced that ourselves in Egypt as the slaves. That's what we must remember as Jews. Fundamental to Jewish values are recognizing actually not only the humanity of every other person, but actually the divinity of every other human on this earth. Our Torah tells us that God created humans in the divine image. So when we encounter another person, our Jewish tradition teaches us that we're actually encountering an image of God. We must treat, as Jews, every person as a manifestation of God's presence. The fundamental teaching of the Torah, that's called the Ten Commandments in English, says, "Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house." These are the most fundamental Jewish values. I'm saying this to remove any illusion that Israel is actually a Jewish country. It's a country created by Jews, a country mostly populated by Jews, but it's not a country that operates as a Jewish country. And no one in Canada or anywhere should think that supporting the country of Israel and what it's doing is in any way supporting what Judaism is about. Opposing it is not anti-Semitic. It's actually a moral obligation of everyone everywhere. And I want to add a little bit to what's already been said about the complicity of our Canadian government. So I've been speaking as a rabbi, and now I want to speak as a Canadian. So in addition to what's already been mentioned, our Canadian government must end its sales and transfers of military equipment to Israel. Similarly, stop buying military technology from Israel. In addition to that, our government must stop the transfer of tens of millions of dollars donated to organizations that have charitable status, but they use that money to support militant settlers who are stealing Palestinian land and actually killing Palestinians using equipment that's bought with the donations that people get write-offs for in Canada. These are tax-deductible charitable donations in Canada. The Canadian Revenue Administration has to revoke those charities' charitable status. They're not charities. Another one is to investigate and, if justified, prosecute suspected war criminals who come here from Israel. We know that there are people who've been in the Israeli military during the last 2 or 3 years when Israel has been blatantly committing this genocide, who come to Canada on speaking tours to talk about what they did while they were there. I don't understand how they're allowed visas to even come here. That's violating Canadian law, and how they can be treated with impunity when they're here. The last thing I want to mention is Canada needs to stop providing diplomatic cover. Canada needs to join South Africa and other countries in the prosecution of the Israeli leaders in the International Court of Justice, the International Criminal Court, and Canada needs to stop providing diplomatic cover for this genocidal state of Israel in the United Nations. So on one hand, I want everyone to remember that what Israel's doing is not Jewish. It's Jews who are doing it, but it's not a Jewish thing. And we all are obliged on just moral grounds to oppose it, try to stop it. And then as a Canadian, I'm like beyond disgusted that my government has not stepped up and done what it needs to do. So I appreciate the opportunity to share that and turn it back to Fareed, and thank you.
Thank you very much, David. And finally, Hugh, unfortunately, we may run out of time, but Hugh, go ahead. I understand your video is now working. If it is, please go ahead, but we have your audio.
Yes, thank you very much. My video is working. If you can hear me, we're good. So, ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you today as co-chair of Canadians in Support of Refugees in Dire Need with a heavy heart. We are confronted with the devastating case of an 18-month-old Jawad Abu Nasser in Gaza, a toddler who was abused by Israeli military with cigarette burns and a nail driven into his leg in order to obtain a forced confession from his father. The horrific abuse he suffered is unfortunately not isolated. It reflects a broader and deeper troubling reality faced by Palestinian children living under brutal occupation in Palestine. According to reports by the UN and organizations like UNICEF, Palestinian children are exposed to widespread and systematic harm. Each year, between 500 and 700 children are imprisoned in the Israeli military system without charge under administrative detention. Many are taken from their homes in the middle of the night, often without explanation to their families. Evidence gathered from hundreds of testimonies show that a majority experience physical violence during arrest and detention. Many are blindfolded, hand-tied, and interrogated without a parent or a lawyer present. Children report being beaten, strip-searched, and searched through intimidation and coercion. Some have described being forced to stand naked in extreme temperatures, suffering bruises, trauma, and severe psychological distress. Conditions in detention have been described as appalling, with reports of abuse, neglect, and malnutrition, starvation, and death. Beyond detention, Palestinian children are also exposed to violence in their daily lives, facing Israeli airstrikes, displacement, and the destruction of schools, hospitals, and basic infrastructure. A recent UN report described the scale of violations against children in Gaza and the West Bank as unprecedented. More than 20,000 children have been killed by the Israeli military in the past 2.5 years. Many have been orphaned, and many have lost limbs and have no access to prosthesis or medical care. Let us be clear. Children are protected under the Geneva Convention under international law. They are entitled to their basic rights to life, food, water, shelter, and medical care. Yet that protection is being denied. Instead, they are being tortured and deprived of the essentials of life, including baby formula, with more than 1,000 babies having been killed in the genocide of the Palestinian people. As Canadians, we cannot look away. We must look to our leadership. Canada must publicly and unequivocally condemn violations against Palestinian children, any children, support independent international investigations into abuses, increase humanitarian aid for medical care and trauma support, and use its diplomatic voice to demand the protection of all children without exception. Jawad Abu Nasser's suffering must not be in vain. His story must be a turning point, an opportunity, a moment that compels us to act. Because every child, Palestinian, Israeli, or anywhere in the world, deserves not to just survive, but to live in safety, dignity, and hope. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Hugh. And I'd just like to conclude by saying that the leaders in the world who are addressing this issue are South Africa and the nations that have signed on to the genocide case against Israel, and certain nations like Ireland, Norway, and Spain. And I have to admire Spain's Prime Minister, who has repeatedly called out Israeli crimes, and Benjamin Netanyahu has expelled the ambassador, has suspended trade. It has responded in one of the most strong ways of the nations. And Canada talks a lot about supporting the international rule of law, supporting human rights. But when it comes down to it, where is that? Mark Carney spoke in Davos of the new rules, the rules-based order, and how we need to join together to uphold it. But where is Canada in what is the most heinous crime being committed, what's been called the crime of crimes? Thank you.
Thank you. Merci. C'est ce qui met fin à la conférence de presse. This concludes the press conference.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, guys. Okay.
Okay, good work, everyone.
Were there any questions from the press gallery or any members from the press gallery that we can get the contacts of and perhaps answer any questions after the conference?
There were no questions.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right.